Hey guys, what is up? It is me, Pagey, here once again with another video on Superman the movie, or just Superman. Superman the movie is from 1978, so we're not going that far back in time. But we, of course, have the Superman, just called Superman movie, trailer coming out tomorrow from when this video is coming out, hopefully, so less than 24 hours away. And recently, a few reporters that were on set when Superman was filming, like what, 6-7 months ago, roughly, they released some set reports that involved some Q&As and discussions with the director and writer of Superman, that of course being James Gunn. And he opens up about the feel and direction of the film and its story and, you know, its characters, as well as diving into the larger world and what this film specifically means going forward, both on screen and just in the real world when it comes to performance. Now, I am using Gizmodo's report as it looked the most well put together of the ones that I skimmed through for the most part. So yeah, I'll just read out mostly what they wrote, which includes mainly the quotes from James Gunn, and we'll discuss what it could mean, or what it does mean potentially. But of course, throughout the video, be sure to let me know in the comments section down below your thoughts on this. Have any worries from the stuff he says? Do you agree with it? Are you looking forward to it? Any theories and predictions, expectations, just overall thoughts? Let me know in the comments. And of course, if you're going to enjoy the video, want to show support, drop a like. Takes 2 seconds. So the first thing of note is the film starts in a unique way, with James Gunn saying we just start in the middle of the action. Superman already exists. Lois and Clark already know each other. Lex hates Superman's guts from the beginning, although they don't know each other personally. So we start right in the middle of the action. And that makes me very intrigued. Like, it's literally the opening scene, like literally a shirt pull or like a rip open the shirt moment and change into Superman and jump into action. I actually wouldn't mind that. Like, whether it is him in the Daily Planet, him on his way to work, maybe him at home, I'm not too sure, but I think that's probably a good way to start the movie. And it does fall in line with Gunn. I think of like Guardians 2, for example, like that just starts in the middle of a fight scene essentially. Like, it's not like this overly like introductory process. So it feels like that's a very Gunn thing to do. So I'm not overly surprised with it. And I think it's a good way to like jump into it. Now, something that's been touched upon is like, obviously this movie is not an origin story, though it's a Superman like somewhat early into his days as Superman. So I don't know if there'll be like really any like overuse of like diving into his origin or really any major hints at it. It will be interesting to see if that's done, but it definitely won't be in like the opening of the film like you'd think would be the case in the first Superman movie in a new universe. The next point is the story takes place over a short period, with Gizmodo saying after dropping Superman into the action, the main story of the movie will take place over, quote from James Gunn, a short amount of time. Now, a short amount of time could be a day, could be a week, could be a couple of weeks. Like, it's not like it's spanning a year or two or something like that. So I don't know, if I had to think like a short amount of time, maybe like 2 weeks, maybe even a week. I don't know. I'm not too sure how long it would be now that I think, because a short amount of time can be very vague. You know, like a short amount of time in like a short context is like, oh yeah, I'll be there in a short amount of time. So like an hour and a half. But in the scope of a movie and introducing new characters and you expect some sort of like progression throughout it, could be like 2 or 3 weeks. So let's just land on like a week and a half, 2 weeks roughly as to what it could mean. But that's good because, you know, you're not like really going to have to take breaks and you miss certain context, or like it's like, oh, 3 months from now and you miss a lot of development in between that time. And with like a fairly younger Superman, like you sort of don't want to be, you know, jumping through time too much. You sort of want to stay with them for the most part in the moment. The next point, Superman is about legacy, but needed a title change. When Gunn's Superman was first announced, it was called Superman Legacy. However, earlier in 2024, that changed and now it's called Superman, or just called Superman. Gunn explained why that happened on set and how legacy remains. I thought maybe the title had a looking back feeling about it, he said, and this isn't about looking back. This is about looking forward. So although when you see the movie, you'll understand where legacy comes from, because it is about Clark and his relationship to his Kryptonian parents and his relationship to his human parents and whose legacy is he really. So it's about that, but I think as a title it felt too looking back. And I sort of agree with that for the most part. I thought like even just calling it Superman Legacy was a big thing, because it's like, well, like what does that mean exactly? And he sort of suggests it there. But, you know, I think calling it Superman, and like the name was there because the 1978 movie wasn't just called Superman. A lot of people just call it Superman, but it's Superman the movie. It's like Superman Legacy. So I think calling it Superman and being this like fresh start is a good idea, but obviously that comes with pressure. So, you know, and I think he knew that as well. Like, I don't think he changed it lightly. I think he definitely had to think about it. Here's a very interesting one that people are really like talking about and wondering what it will look like. And hopefully the trailer come tomorrow from when you're watching this shows us an instance or an example of it, and that's that action scenes were filmed mid-air. With it being said, being able to shoot stuff in the sky is really hard, so we took a lot from films like Top Gun Maverick, Gunn said. We shoot a lot of our action with actual drones flying in and around Superman and the people that he's flying with, the engineer and whoever else that he's up and fighting up in the air, and we did that on sound stages. We got these really cool, crazy drones. We got some of the best flies in the world here who are working with it. So I'd assume obviously like the stuff with the actual actors is done on the sound stage, but they do like almost, I guess maybe like a POV, like a point of view thing with the drones. And I'm thinking of it, like you look up some of those crazy drone clips on YouTube and stuff like that. They're pretty insane, especially the ones that like fly in between gaps and stuff like that. I think that would look really, really cool, just the specific movements and stuff like that. So that intrigues me because you can obviously easily do it with CGI. Films have done it in the past, will do it going forward, but using the drones obviously would add like a bit of a more real world aspect, might I say, and a bit of a different viewpoint as well. So it'd be interesting to see if it works. You know, that's a big thing because it's different. Like Top Gun Maverick, obviously that's with the, you know, the fighter jets and stuff like that, but you can understand the similarities and the comparisons there. Now, this is a big one, the next thing, because people have been wondering about like the tone and stuff. And the thing that Gizmodo writes is that it'll be more serious than Guardians of the Galaxy, with Gunn saying, I start with a place that's very hopeful, fun, but incredibly grounded and incredibly serious all at the same time. It's humorous, but it certainly is not as comedic as either Suicide Squad or Guardians. There's plenty of humor in it. People like Rachel Brosnahan, who plays Lois Lane, are so funny, and David Corenswet, who plays Superman, is very funny as well. So there's humor in it, but it's trying to create something that is grounded. But also, it's an incredibly fanciful world. It's fantasy. It's taking from other things like Game of Thrones, where it's this universe where superheroes actually exist. What are they like? There's a magic there that's undeniable. Now, when he says grounded, I think he means like emotionally grounded. I think people sometimes think ground is too much and like, oh, it's like realism, like the Dark Knight and the Batman and things like that. It's more grounded emotionally, like the characters feel real. In regards to the humor thing, like he's saying it's a bit more serious, it's not as funny. I like that because I don't know if this is a hot take. I don't think James Gunn is that funny. Like, I don't really laugh too much at some of the stuff that he does. I always think he's just trying to push it a bit too much, but I really like his character writing. So I think if he's leaning more into that, then I'm probably going to enjoy the movie more than someone that might prefer Guardians of the Galaxy and the humor there, because I just don't really find Gunn that funny for the most part. I don't know if that's a hot take. I think I've heard some people agree with me, but then again, I think they might be haters. So I'm not a hater. I just don't think he's that funny, but I do like his character writing. So I'm really liking what I'm hearing here, where he's leaning more into that, and when the humor is right, it's used. So that's a green tick for me. Another curious point was about the songs or the music in the film, and what they're saying is that the movie is score driven, not song driven, plus John Williams. There's nods to John Williams, and then also John Murphy's created this incredibly beautiful score, James Gunn said. But the one thing is it is a score. It's not a soundtrack. So it's not about the songs. There's a few songs in it, and of course I chose those songs beforehand, but it isn't like any of my previous movies really in terms of the score is what drives it. It's a much more of a score film. This is interesting because I actually thought Gunn would be a bit different. I was actually sort of hoping it'd be a bit different. We're not relying on a score for a Superman film because John Williams and Hans Zimmer have done so heavy in the past. And you see that with Batman films as well. And I was sort of hoping he would make it a very like soundtrack driven Superman, because I think that'd be a bit different. Obviously he's leaned into doing the score, which, you know, I'm fine with that, because he also said there's some songs in there, but like James Gunn is always like pretty like, you know, good with his music choices, especially when he has a budget where he can pretty much choose any song he wants. So I wouldn't say I'm disappointed he's using a score, because I heard the score that they put on the that motion poster the other day, and that sounded good. So I'm excited to see how that sounds in the movie and some other stuff. But you know, I was hoping there'd be more like of a soundtrack to it, though he said there's some songs in there. Now, apparently one of the songs that's used, there's no proof to it either. It's just like a report, but I think it was from someone who might have talked about the Ultraman thing, which ended up being correct. But they said that Tub Thumping by Chumbawamba, which is like, I get knocked down, that song, apparently that's in the movie. So, but then again, that could just been a song that was played on set. It might not actually be in the movie, but I think Gunn plays the songs on set for the specific scenes they're going to be used in. So that might be where it's coming from. But here's a big one. Superman wears trunks for a good reason. With Gunn saying we were trying on all these different versions and we screen test with trunks and no trunks. And one of the things David Cornswet said is that Superman wants kids to not be afraid of him. He's an alien. He's got these incredible powers. He shoots beams out of his eyes. He's this incredibly powerful, could be considered scary individual. And he wants people to like him. He wants to be a symbol of hope and positivity. So he dresses like a professional wrestler. He dresses in a way that makes people unafraid of him. That shows that hope, that shows that positivity, and that really clicked in for me. And I think trying to pretend that Superman's costume doesn't have some frivolity to it, at its base, trying to make it look serious is silly because he is a superhero. He's the first one, brightly colored, and that's who he is. And I think that's fair. Like, it is interesting that like David Cornswet was the one that sort of, at least that's what Gunn's saying, that David Cornswet was the one that sort of, I guess, cemented there being trunks. If it was that same suit design, I think it without trunks would have looked a bit weird. So it's probably just because of like the blockiness of it, I guess you could say. So it's probably good that it has trunks. But I always felt he was going to go trunks. I know he's saying that he was like leaning towards no trunks. I think Gunn was always going trunks, but also you got to like keep in mind the person who's playing Superman, because they're the one that has to wear it. So he probably just got a second opinion. And he was like, yeah, I like the trunks. So Gunn was like, okay, trunks it is. Mr. Terrific is crucial. I love Mr. Terrific, Gunn said. These characters all get their moment in the sun. They all have their moments. They're not just cameos. These are the characters. They're supporting cast, but Mr. Terrific is the main character of those characters. He actually has a big part of the plot, and so that was that was fun. And I'm not overly surprised with this, because I think Gunn probably wants to do something with Mr. Terrific in a more lead role going forward, whether it is a Terrifics thing or even down the road when they get to like a Justice League style thing or something like that. So it's not too surprising. Obviously he said stuff about the Silver Age and stuff like that, so it brings in the science aspect, which Mr. Terrific would lean into as well. So I'm not too surprised by Mr. Terrific being the more important out of those ones we've seen there. I mean, it would be weird if Guy Gardner or something was the more important out of those supporting characters. So nothing too surprising there. It's just that, the term crucial, it's like how crucial. So that'll be interesting to see. Lex Luthor is almost a sorcerer. All-Star Superman influenced me more than anything, Gunn said. Being able to take that sort of Silver Age feel, which we've said before, that sort of science fiction approach to it with gadgets, Lex is really a sort of sorcerer in a way. He's a scientist, but he's so good at science, and I think of him as like a sorcerer. And that's like, as soon as he said Silver Age, and even like the All-Star Superman thing, of course, like you are leaning into like that, like the mad scientist sort of like Lex Luthor. And the thing that he said before, where like, like Lex hates him and stuff like that earlier on, we're talking about him, like, that's a very interesting thing, I think, when it comes to Lex seeing Superman as a threat, but also like a bit of like an envious aspect to it as well. So I'm interested to see how that's presented on screen, because it can be hard in a movie to do that, especially when you have a lot of other moving parts as well, like with the, those other heroes like Guy Gardner and Mr. Terrific and stuff, and there's like the other villain aspect going on, and you just have Superman himself as a character, Clark Kent as a character, and there's a lot of moving parts. Being able to focus that and make that a main thing isn't easy. I think Gunn will balance it, but I'm intrigued to see, because it is going to be a very much different Lex Luthor than we've seen, at least recently. Now, this is a big claim by James Gunn, but he says, we've never seen a Clark and Lois relationship like this, with Gizmodo saying Gunn hesitated to say it, but he said it. When talking about the relationship between Clark Kent and Lois Lane in the film, he said, I don't think it's something we've ever seen in any superhero movie before, ever. He then elaborated, it's a complicated relationship when we really get into it, Gunn said. There's long scenes that are about their relationship and the way they relate and what it would be like for a person who's this incredibly intelligent, strong-headed, stubborn, skeptical journalist to have a relationship with someone who can lift a skyscraper. And once again, it goes back to the thing we're talking about with Lex Luthor. It's whether you can balance it with all the different stuff that's going on and whether it feels genuine and stuff. And obviously having good chemistry can be a bit of a cheat code in regards to like progressing that, because I've always said one of the issues with Man of Steel, for example, is that the chemistry between Lois Lane and Clark Kent or Superman in that film is as good as a mouse and a rat trap. Like, it's not great. Ends up in death. It's just not a good thing. So he's done screen tests. He thinks that David Cornswet and Rachel Brosnahan, aka Superman and Lois Lane, the chemistry is really good, which allows things to progress in a much more even fashion. It helps with a lot of different things there. So I'm sure that when he says this, he's talking about like that chemistry, and that it allows them to also dive into different emotions as well, which is good, and also in a condensed runtime. But he also does talk about the big question about Lois knowing who Superman is. And they say, or Gizmodo says, jumping off the question of Lois and Clark's relationship, Gunn was asked if Lois knew Clark was Superman. He said, well, we'll see. She knows who Superman is, which I mean, if he's flying around, you know who Superman is. So that gives the I guess, the insinuation that she doesn't, but she might learn throughout the movie. Yeah, I'd assume that maybe she finds out in like some moment where Clark has to reveal he's Superman to do something, maybe. I'd assume so at the very least, something like that. The next thing, Superman is largely a standalone. Everything needs to stand by itself, Gunn said. I don't want somebody to have to go see this movie and be relying on anything else. Now listen, once we get down the line, that may change a bit. Are seeds being planted? Yes. There's seeds being planted, but that is never going to be the predominant thing in any scene for me. It's always about getting to the next scene, what's in the moment, how are we making this movie the best we can be, and it's going to stay like that as much as I can possibly make it like that. And I'm sure there's going to be some seeds being planted. It'd be weird if there wasn't. I mean, the engineers in this movie, for example, we know that like Rick Flag Sr.'s in this movie, so this carries on with him saying that one upcoming DC property does get set up, with Gunn confirming that the events of Superman will impact Peacemaker Season 2, and that maybe there will be one or two things at the end of this film teasing toward the future, but he did admit that they might get cut. So obviously Peacemaker will be set up probably with the Rick Flag Sr. thing, maybe with something else. And in regards to the other things that could be teasing, I mean, maybe Waller, but you'd like to think maybe Supergirl. That's the next movie after Superman. It's Supergirl. You know, Millie Alcock was cast while, you know, before Superman, wrapped filming. You know, you assume that she filmed something for Superman, but that might be the thing that might get cut. They might go, I don't know, okay, maybe this doesn't work. Maybe we'll just leave it until the Supergirl movie. That might be the better way to introduce the character. But I think that's probably it. So like Peacemaker Season 2, probably Supergirl, and then maybe something like Waller or Lands might get set up. Or maybe the Authority, because of course we have the character of the engineer within the film of Superman as well. And the second last thing is, not many people know the real Superman. While talking about casting, Gunn said that he needed an actor who could play both Clark Kent well and Superman well, because that duality is the core of the character. It's not just Clark, it's not just Superman, it's Clark/Superman, Gunn said, and the only people that know Clark/Superman are his mum and his dad, and a few others who know who he is. That's interesting. And those are very different things. People say all sorts of different things. They say Clark's the real one. They say Superman's the real one and Clark's a secret identity. But I don't. And it says in my script on the second page, I don't believe either of those things. I don't think anybody knows Superman unless they know both of him. And when they know both of him, they know the real guy. Now, yeah, I agree with that. But I also am very intrigued by he says his mum and dad know, you know, the Clark and the Superman, and a few others know who he is. Who are those others? That's interesting. Is it people from Smallville, people who grew up with, Lana Lang? Or is it someone like Jimmy Olsen? Does it end up being someone like Lois Lane? Is it, you know, who is that? Like that gets me intrigued. So that'll be an interesting thing to keep an eye out on, if you know what I mean. And the final thing, and arguably the thing that I've seen probably talked about the most on Twitter, it's all riding on this. When we spoke with Gunn on the set of Superman a year from release, he was pretty overwhelmed for a lot of reasons. I'm miserable, he said. Really, I'm miserable. But hopefully it's for the greater good. One of the reasons for that seemed to be the pressure he's putting on himself to make sure his version of Superman is great, because if it's not, there's no guarantee we'll see more DC movies after that. There's a plan, one that involves Creature Commandos, Peacemaker, Supergirl, and others, but if Superman doesn't work, well, things could change very quickly. A lot is riding on Superman, he said. I mean, we're not going to just keep making movies, that is, unless Superman is great. And this is a big thing. Like, I've seen people like really overplaying it, but I've seen a lot of people underplaying it as well. What this movie needs to do. This movie doesn't have to make $1 billion. I've seen people say it has to make $1 billion or the universe is screwed. I'm like, no, it doesn't have to make $1 billion. But also I've seen people saying like it can make like 400 million, and as long as the movie's half decent, then they're fine because it's a good starting off point. But for me, I don't think that's the case. I don't think they can have this thing where they get like a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes, but the movie flops. That's not going to work. Like this is Superman. They're making this the backbone of the universe. But I think if it makes like around what Man of Steel made, which I think is like 650 to like 700, if it makes around that, it gets a decent return, like decent critical score. It doesn't have to be 95. Anything above 80, because I'm sure like there might be some things where people are like, oh, I'm not the biggest fan of it. Also, Superman can be a bit of a divisive character in regards to like, you know, the struggles, because he's a pretty overpowered character. So, and it just depends, because this is a different movie. Gunn's never made a movie like this. Gunn's used to making like the team movies, Guardians, Suicide Squad. Even if we go to Peacemaker as a show, Creature Commandos as a show, they follow a very similar structure and formation. Superman's not. This is about one character. So that could be a big difference in regards to how people see this movie as well. But, you know, there's a lot riding on it. I don't think if it goes like slightly under, like if it maybe makes like around 6 or something, 600 million or something, that it's like, you know, ring the alarm bells, because by that point, they will already have finished filming Supergirl. Lands will already be done. They're going to release those projects. And you never know, they might perform a bit better because people might catch Superman like after the fact on streaming or whatever it is, and then support Supergirl lands as a show and other movies going forward. But you know, as a DC fan, this is the last chance of the connected universe. If this doesn't work, you're just going to get more Batman movies and then random solo movies going forward. You know, they're not going to bother with the connected universe, which I would probably agree with. Just drop the connected universe. It's just not for DC in the cinematic space, unfortunately. People just don't want to support it. So hopefully, fingers crossed, people do. So at least we can try for the next few years after that and get people to buy into it. Because if Superman's a success, it doesn't mean Supergirl's a success. It doesn't mean, you know, the Authority's a success. It doesn't mean that, you know, the shows are more of a success. It doesn't mean that at all. But at the same time, I don't think if Superman fails, it means everything else is going to fail, because it just, you know, people like different things. But just for the sake of DC going forward, I just hope Superman does okay. So at least there's some sort of confidence going forward. Otherwise, RIP any sort of connected universe going forward, and just solo projects or solo universes, might I say, like a Batman trilogy, another Superman trilogy, a Wonder Woman trilogy that's not connected to anything. That's probably what we're going to get. Or Warner Brothers might just sell DC to another company. We'll wait and see. But yeah, guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, be awesome if you could drop a like and to show support. Let me know in the comment section down below your various opinions on everything we run over this video. Always curious to read what you guys are thinking. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. And yeah, I'll catch you guys later. Goodbye.